Hello, everyone. Welcome to Melissa's Musings. I am Melissa Steele, real estate agent extraordinaire, as you guys know. And I was thinking about something recently today. It was actually really interesting, so I'm going to dive right into a story as you guys join me. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching on the replay. Let me know where you're watching from and give me some love, some hearts. But I was thinking about something. It was like on my mind because a couple weeks ago, John and I were at a housewarming party. And at housewarming parties, I love housewarming parties because not only do we get to see our clients moving, and typically they're buyers who've bought a home recently and are now having a housewarming. So not only do we get to see the property and what the client has done to the property, I'm noticing that in this painting behind me, these two little people look like little hairs growing out of my head. Look at that, too funny. And so I love housewarmings because not only do we get to see what the client's house looks like since they moved in, how they made it their own, like how they decorated it, what they did to it, we also get an opportunity to meet a lot of their friends and family. So people that they, interact and love and have in their personal sphere. And usually at a housewarming, it's people who are important to them. Because housewarmings, from my experience, are typically pretty intimate, where you have maybe 20, 30 people there to help you welcome and enjoy your new home. So at this particular housewarming, I was introduced to one of our client's friends, and it was so interesting to me, his mentality around himself, the way that he talked about himself. Because right away, I was like, oh, what do you do? And because I love people, I love learning about people and, getting to know people. And so right away he was like, oh, I do this and this. And it was something with computers. But it's something that he made a comment like, oh, it's something losers do. And I was like, that's an interesting comment to make. And then a few, minutes later, he was like, oh yeah, but not many people understand it. It's something really complicated. I'm really antisocial because of it. And I was thinking what an interesting way to be talking about himself. And what was very fascinating to me is that as he was talking about himself, it was from such a negative space. It was fascinating. John and I were looking at each other from across the room, and it was actually really interesting because our client hopped in as we were talking to him, and she was like, why do you even think that about yourself? That's a really limited mindset. And I was like, oh, sister, yeah, let's step into this mindset conversation, because I didn't really want to just be like, that's really interesting, not knowing him, but I did give him some feedback, especially when she opened up and gave me the permission to, by kind of starting that out. But it was so interesting because that's literally how the entire conversation with him went. Everything that I asked him about himself, it was an answer. Sorry, phone call. It was an answer plus something negative. So it was like, yeah, but I'm really bad at it. Or yeah, but I don't have a lot of friends. Yeah, my job is okay, but I find that I hate the social interaction aspect of it. And it was so interesting to me because the way that he was talking about himself, this kid was probably brilliant. He was a computer analyst, developer type mindset, had a really good job. The company that he worked for was well known. But what was so fascinating to me was not once did I have the experience of, wow, listen to this powerhouse person who is dominating the development space. My experience of him was oh my goodness, look at this person just wallowing in self-pity and helplessness. It was so interesting. And it was 100% from the way that he was talking about himself, from his experience of himself, from the perception that he had, which was then causing his reality. So even though his job, and I'm going to just straight up say this because I can pretty much guarantee you that his job is not the cause of, for example, the lack of connection and how he feels really disconnected from a lot of the people that he works with. I would say that that's probably not the type of work. What my experience of it would be the way that he's presenting himself. Because if that's how it's coming across in the work setting, it's going to be really tough to find work friends. So it was just so interesting to me because I've read a variety of different examples of this in particular, not only with this one individual at the housewarming, but I've seen it on the opposite side of the spectrum. Right? Tony Robbins talks about how often he practices mindset in the opposite way. I'm unstoppable. I'm absolutely going to achieve this. I can do anything I set my mind to. Those type of messaging. And I find that that's a way that I often talk about myself when I find that I am not seeing myself in my absolute best light. I get to reflect on it and shift into that. for myself. Like, I recognize it right away when I'm not seeing myself in my highest light. So it's a really powerful realization for those of us who are very in tune with what we want out of our goals, what we are accomplished, and what we are committed to accomplishing in this space, in this world, and in our time. It's really important to notice how we present ourselves, how we are perceiving ourselves, and how that perception of ourselves is then influencing others, and how we may be perceiving our reality, and how the perceptions of ourselves are very much developing our reality. So I found it very fascinating because I didn't know this man at all. I'd known him for like 5 minutes. And the more that he talked, the more my experience of him was that he was, very down, like hard on himself, very down on himself. I got the impression that he really didn't enjoy what he was doing. I got the experience of him really just kind of making the motions and going through the steps just to, have a job for the sake of having a job, being at that party for the sake of just being at the party, having those colleagues in his sphere. And so I found it so appalling because it was that apparent to me. And it was such an important lesson. So the lessons aren't always that crystal clear. Sometimes it's just a simple comment from a friend that's a really limiting conversation that you know that they have, and that's something that you get to address with them. Or it could be a situation as dramatic as this, where literally every word that comes out of somebody's mouth is bashing of themselves, is like detrimental to themselves. It's bringing themselves down versus building themselves up, and that's a total mindset. So I found it so interesting, the fixed mindset, and our mutual friend, the person that was hosting the housewarming, being like, dude, like, I'm so sorry to hear you saying those things. It's a total fixed mindset approach, was really interesting to me, because I was not the only one noticing at the party, basically. I was simply the one conversing with him, therefore bringing it up. And it was something that was clearly affecting multiple people at the party, and enough that it turned into a full-blown conversation about, if you're not liking your job, why aren't you shifting into something else? Like, what do you like to do? And I learned and it was actually really interesting, because when I asked him, what do you like to do? He answered several times in regurgitation, oh, I like this about my job. And I was like, no, that's not lighting you up. Like, what do you love about life? And he was like, oh, this is about my job. And I was like, no, you're missing it, my friend. What do you love? Like, what lights you up? And I asked him about 5 times. I'm not even exaggerating. And about 4 or 5 times, he gave me an answer that he thought I wanted to hear. Like, oh, my job. Or, oh, this is decent. Blah, 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 blah. And what was really interesting, I looked him in the eye and I was like, no. Like, stop telling me the answer that you feel like I want to hear. What do you love to do? And it was the first time that he lit up. And he was like, I love to travel. I would love to do development worldwide. Being, untied and untethered to any particular location, being able to do my work from anywhere in the world. And I was like, that is the first moment in this entire 20-minute conversation that you have even lit up a little bit. I was like, what is holding you back from doing that? And that's really when the conversation got exciting and got going, because it was finally, he was tapping into what he actually wanted instead of the answer that he thought I wanted to receive. So really powerful lesson on my end. Hope you guys found it helpful and powerful as well. Thank you for joining in and watching. Thank you so much for you guys tuning in. So many of you joined in. Ben, Alex, thanks, Ben. He's got some wine, he says, for housewarming parties. I love it. Alex, I know you're on point with this topic. Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I love you. Hope you're having a great Thursday. I'll talk to you soon.